All right. Grace, mercy, and peace from him who is and was and is to come very soon, I'm certain. This is Rogue Diabetic, and welcome to the Digital Wilderness. So, let's see. Wednesday, I went to a forum campaign event for 1st District Nebraska Congressman Mike Flood. A little campaign event that the Republican Party, one of the local county Republican parties, put on. And Congressman Flood gave a little talk, and I asked him a question. So what I wanted to do is I just wanted to play you a little clip of his monologue. We'll skip the questions from the other people, and then we'll go ahead and take a look at what my question was. Now, I talked a little bit about it in my last video, and we'll go ahead and listen to this, and then we'll talk about this a little bit more.
Started working on it in 2005 when I started the legislature, and there are a whole combination of decisions that have been made, not the least of which is basically him telling the Department of Transportation, we're going to do this, even though it's tough. There were other governors that passed on building this, and instead they diverted resources to the West Dodge Expressway. I'm not saying that didn't need to be done, but we were this close to getting going before, and now we're going to get our 4-lane. I want to talk about this race. There's a reason I'm in West Point today. I need this county to show up. I lost by 10,000 votes in the city of Lincoln. Lincoln is a lot more blue today than it ever has been. And when you drive through some of those neighborhoods, house after house after house has a sign for my opponent. And I'm in Congress today because counties like Cumming, Madison, Platte, Stanton, Colfax, Dodge, Cass came together and voted in a big way to send me to Washington and to have somebody in Washington that understands there's a difference between the neighborhood in Lincoln and what happens in the rest of the state. I live in Norfolk. I've raised my kids in Norfolk. I have built my businesses in small towns. I know what it takes to be successful in a community that really rallies around each other. And that's what we have here in Cumming County. I sat in Congress in my second week, just got there, and I'm in the Oversight Committee. And believe it or not, AOC is the chair of this subcommittee. And the topic that day was why feedlots are bad, or as they call them, confined animal feeding operations. And why we shouldn't have more than 170 cows on a feedlot or in a dairy. Why the methane and the water treatment and all that stuff is killing America. Literally, these people on the East and West Coast, they don't have any idea where their food comes from. And if I would have sat in your shoes and heard a congressman tell me that, I would have thought, well, that's hyperbole. I sat there and witnessed it myself. I called Jeff Boyer right away at KTIC and my radio friends, and I said, you're not going to believe what I just heard. This county needs it.
Okay, so sorry about that. Let me back that up a little bit. This guy here, his business, he's an attorney. He's a partner in a law firm in eastern Nebraska. And but his main business is he owns several radio stations. Now, apparently he's divested some of his interest, and he has partners and such. But this guy's business is the media. Just to give you a little bit of context about, when he talks about the businesses that he's built here in Nebraska.
Jeff Boyer right away at KTIC and my radio friends, and I said, you're not going to believe what I just heard. We got to have a seat at the table. This county needs it. This livestock industry needs advocates out there because they're coming with their climate change plans. They're coming for beef production. They're against commercial agriculture, and they're against essentially people having enough scale to make any money. And that's a problem. As your congressman, I look around, and here's what I hear from people all the time. Whether I'm at Wisner West or, earlier today I was at a place in Lincoln, people basically say, I've got less money in my pocket this month, at the end of this month, than I had last month. And a year to date, I'm not doing very well. Diesel is out of control. I bet you being transportation could talk to you about that. Fertilizer costs are out of control. All of this government spending has landed us with the largest inflation rate in 40 years. And then when it comes to energy, our president desperately trying to win midterm elections, he's worried about gas prices. What's the first thing he does? He flies over to Saudi Arabia to get on a bended knee to the oil barons and beg them to increase production. What do? They cut production. So where does he go next? He goes to Venezuela to deal with the communists, a regime that doesn't have America's best interest at heart. He'd rather do business with them than authorize permits to drill in the United States, than authorize the Keystone XL pipeline, than authorize natural gas drilling in the Marcellus Formation in Ohio or Williston, North Dakota. His choice is everything but American energy independence. And we know that if we aren't energy independent, number one, we're going to pay more. He just passed a bill, thanks to Nancy Pelosi, $500 billion more so that everybody can drive an electric vehicle. And by the way, there's not enough lithium in the United States to even meet the demand that he wants. So where do we have to go for the lithium? China. It's crazy. He wants us to drive electric vehicles. He wants no coal. Think about that 2 years ago when it was 35 degrees below zero.
Okay, and just real quick, the person standing to the right of him is Governor Pete Ricketts. So, and we'll talk about him a little bit here in a second.
States like Kansas, Missouri, rolling brownouts. What did we have in Nebraska? We had Cooper Nuclear Station down in Brownville, and we had Gerald Gentleman Station, a coal plant outside of North Platte. And we had 19 emergency. I am granting.
Okay, so that was where he started to shift away from the energy narrative, and the rhetoric you heard him say is fairly typical for these Republicans. And there isn't any doubt that, you know, I missed the 500 billion, so another $500 billion. In addition to the 1.9 trillion in the Inflation Production Act. So they're always eager to point out these insane spending packages that these Democrats and these Democratic Congresses and presidents enact and sign into law, but they don't. They never seem to they have a short-term memory. Now, this guy is new. Okay, he won a special election earlier this year to replace a congressman that had to resign. And so he wasn't in during the pandemic. Okay, when a Republican administration and a Republican Senate and a Democratic Congress, a Democratic House of Representatives, almost unanimously passed. I mean, I lost track. Well over $3 trillion in spending for the COVID nonsense. It's like it's flushed. It's like that spending is flushed down the memory hole. Now the Governor Ricketts was the governor during the pandemic, and he sent armed thugs to packing plants to shut them down during the pandemic. Now, of course, I'm sure he would say that he didn't shut them down, that he just sent the National Guard there to take people's temperature, as if that wasn't meant to intimidate these packing plants. Okay, so when you're talking about all of this inflation that we're seeing today, the groundwork for that was laid by policies enacted by Republicans in collusion with Democrats. I mean, these guys cannot agree on anything. They can't agree on nothing except COVID, vaccines, and Ukraine. So they always, and they always conveniently leave it out. So now we're going to go ahead and listen to my question to him. Like I said, Congressman Flood was not there when during the pandemic, well, I mean, it's not like it's over. It's not like, or well, I mean, depending on what you call, I mean, depending on how you define certain things, is the national emergency isn't over. They never stopped the national emergency. Okay, that's still ongoing. But he wasn't there for that, so I didn't nail him on that. However, instead of going there, I went to the Ukraine. Okay, $40 billion in spending. We've sent $40 billion in spending to Ukraine. We've sanctioned Russia and embargoed their oil. Okay, that hasn't hurt Putin. That hasn't hurt Putin. That hasn't. And that's like whenever you print money, you drive inflation.
Yeah.
In addition to Biden's war on energy, the Senate voted 100-0 to embargo and sanction Russia, and to send $40 billion to Ukraine for their defense, supposedly. I believe that that's been driving this inflation, a lot of this inflation that we see, as much as anything else. If you get elected, are you gonna stand with Ukraine, or are you gonna stand with the First District?
Well, I don't know that they're mutually exclusive. Like, at the end of the day, I want Vladimir Putin to be unsuccessful taking over the sovereign territory of Ukraine. And somebody that's got a 16-year-old and a 13-year-old, I think about the world that we're going to leave them, and I think about what it could mean if we have Russia unchecked in Ukraine. Because you know who's watching all that? President Xi in China. Yeah. And he's got his eyes on Taiwan. And he's watching to see how the world reacts. I'm very proud that NATO has stood strong, and I think we're stronger today than we were 3 or 4 years ago. I think that the Germans are now understanding they have to invest more in their national security and pay their fair share. And from this, I think there's been a lot of strength developed. But it's in our nation's best interest for Putin to be stopped in Ukraine. And it also is a bigger, louder message to President Xi in China that you don't get to go around and do this. Because right now we have the axis of power. We have the Chinese, we have the Russians, we have the North Koreans, and now there's word the Iranians are involved, obviously, in Ukraine. So, I don't have any new spending proposals in front of me as a member of Congress, but I'm very committed to seeing Vladimir Putin stopped.
So yes on the sanctions and yes on the $40 billion.
I did support the $40 billion that I did not have the chance to vote for it because I wasn't there yet. And we haven't had a new funding package that's run through Congress. Any new funding package needs to be scrutinized, and as a member of Congress, I have the benefit of getting briefings on your behalf from the United States military and from our armed forces. And before any more money is authorized, I would want the benefit of all of the classified intelligence that we get as members of Congress. So.
Okay, so Ukraine is not part of NATO. And whenever you and that's that's his answer. We're not obligated to defend Ukraine. We don't have any treaty obligations with Ukraine. For one thing. For another thing, Putin is not being hurt by a doubling in the price of a barrel of oil. Okay, that just means he might not be selling it to us, but that just means he's buying that much. He's just getting that much more for it from the countries that he is selling it to. Okay, and because this China business, okay, our leverage against China Sending $40 billion to Ukraine is not increasing our leverage against China. It doesn't. That doesn't help. China is like the biggest holder of debt, of American debt, of almost of any country in the world. China isn't. China isn't hurt, or our ability to protect ourselves against any aggression that they might engage in, military or otherwise, isn't helped by printing $40 billion, by borrowing $40 billion and sending it to the Ukraine. And you guys, I mean, just so you know, I heard Marjorie Taylor Greene. Over in the next day, there was a Trump rally down the road from where this was at, and Marjorie Taylor Greene was in a speech said no more money for Ukraine. Okay, and that's what they do. That's part of this narrative. Okay, so first of all, there's she's just one person. Even if she was legit, she's just one person. She's just one congressman. Okay. And the reason why they do that, the reason why they send out people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, and by the way, this happened before. So I don't want anybody in the comments, anybody trolling in the comments saying that that I'm somehow affiliated or associated with Marjorie Taylor Greene. Okay, but the reason why they sent her out to say things like that is because this wasn't the last time during this. This went on for probably another 20-30 minutes. And this isn't the last time that, and I wasn't the only one that expressed concerns on this particular topic, on the topic of Ukraine and sending money to Ukraine and the inflationary effect that these sanctions on Russia have, particularly in energy. Okay, and the reason why they send Marjorie Taylor Greene out to posture as if she stands with her congressional district and not with Ukraine, like Congressman Flood. The reason why they send her out to posture that way is so people think, then they hear that and they think that this guy, because he's a Republican. Okay. Now, I wouldn't say that either one of these guys standing up here, Pete Ricketts or Mike Flood, have necessarily distanced themselves from the MAGA Republicans or from Donald Trump. But they haven't been openly as supportive, as vocally supportive of President Trump as some of these other politicians. I do know that Governor Ricketts endorsed a different candidate for governor than Trump did, and Ricketts guy won. And in this whole thing, I never heard Trump. I never heard the T word. I never heard the A word. I didn't hear anything about abortion or Trump or Marjorie Taylor Greene or MAGA Republicans or insurrection or anything like that. And towards the end of his talk, he started talking about a digital dollar, as if it was fait accompli, and there was nothing that we could do about it. Okay, so Republicans, when you go to the polls coming up, and I'm assuming most of you haven't, and that's fine. I mean, it doesn't matter anyway. This has all been everything is predetermined. Everything is already settled behind closed doors. Who's going to control Congress? But regardless of the political theater, okay, they're going to keep shipping money to Ukraine. They're going to continue these sanctions that are driving particularly the energy inflation. They're going to digitize the currency. That's coming. That's like in these next 2 years. That might be early next year now. I mean, he wasn't. I mean, I couldn't believe it when he started talking about a digital dollar. My jaw dropped to the floor. I was like, "What did you just say?" I didn't just blurt it out quite yet, but I did say. So you're saying you guys are saying that you're getting rid of cash, right? And he was like, "Yeah," he didn't deny it. He did not deny that that they're going to digitize the dollar and that they're going to and that was going to in effect get rid of cash. And then he said, "Well, China's doing it, and they have a social credit score." And I was like, "So what would prevent our government from abusing a digital dollar in the same way of giving that kind of centralized power, to the banks? Well, in the same way that China's done it. I mean, they just shut down Kanye's bank account because he sold a T-shirt that they didn't like. So I mean, what's going to stop them from abusing this power in the same way? And he was like, "Well, there's not just one bank, and blah 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 blah." But it's like he just dodged again, like he tried to dodge on Ukraine. Okay, Mike Flood stands with Ukraine. Just know that if you're gonna go and vote for him, just know that. And all these people, just I have a sentimental weakness for Republicans, especially Republicans from that I know, because I knew some of the people in that room. And so just understand before you go, okay, these guys are globalists. They're globalists. They're not standing for the first district for Nebraska. Okay, they're standing with Ukraine and the New World Order. So, I love you guys. Don't take the mark. Don't take the mark. If you've taken it already, repent. And Jesus is the only one that can stop this now. So put your faith in him. Like, share, subscribe, click the notification bell, leave a comment, and I'm out.